Transatlantic Televiews, a program of interviews on questions Americans are asking about the British. The interviewer is Robert McKenzie. In this edition of Transatlantic Televiews, he is interviewing Mr. Selwyn Lloyd, who is Britain's new Foreign Secretary. Mr. Selwyn Lloyd is no newcomer to the Foreign Office. As Minister of State, he was formerly deputy to Sir Anthony Eden and led the British delegation to the United Nations during the years 1951 to 1954. He will already be known to many viewers since he frequently appeared on American television during those years. More recently, he has been Britain's Minister of Defense, and in view of his experience at the Defense Ministry, Robert McKenzie is going to question him mainly on the defense aspects of Britain's foreign policy.
Now, Mr. Selwyn Lloyd, I think there's one question which many Americans would like to ask, and that is, why did Britain decide to make the atomic and hydrogen bombs? The American allies already had made these bombs, and what motivated you people to do the same thing?
Well, we think that today the possession of the nuclear deterrent is the essence of real defense, and we therefore were determined to make some contribution to that ourselves. We wanted to remain a great power in our own right. And also, great as are the resources of the United States, they aren't limitless. So I should think it would be a very welcome contribution that we should help in this all-important weapon of defense. That's why we decided to make it.
Enormously expensive, of course. Is it going to be within your resources to do it?
We believe so. We're making satisfactory progress with atomic and hydrogen weapons and with the means of delivering them. And we believe it is within our resources, and we've got a very useful contribution to make to the defense of the free world in that way.
Now, in how far is your own country really defensible? Here you are, an island about the size of the state of Oregon, and not very far from the Red Army, a few hundred miles to the east. Is this a defensible proposition, this country?
Well, of course, we do live in an age when the deterrent is the only real protection. And that's why we're relying upon the primary deterrent of nuclear weapons. Also, there are the secondary deterrents, the NATO screen of troops in Europe, of troops in the Middle East, and troops in Southeast Asia. They also are part of our defenses. And in addition to that, of course, we've got to see that we win the Cold War, that when there's trouble throughout the world, created by our enemies or otherwise, that we're in a position to deal with that. So our defense really is the main nuclear deterrent, the subsidiary screens of troops on the ground, and also our capacity to fight the Cold War. That's really where the defense of Britain lies at the present time.
And not in any sense just on the Channel, as it were?
Not just on, not on the White Cliffs of Dover any longer.
Well, now, I think some people sometimes are inclined to believe that Britain's resources are perhaps spread out too thinly, and for that matter, too many of them tied down in places like Kenya and various other trouble spots where you're having to deal with rebellious populations. And you'd be a much stronger ally, some would feel, if your forces were concentrated more here in Europe.
Well, there's no doubt that our commitments throughout the world are a heavy burden to us. But on the other hand, we think it's vital to the defense of the free world that we should hold our position in those territories. Take, for example, Malaya. There's been a bitter war going on, a real fighting war against the communists for something like 8 years. And there have been a good many British casualties in the course of it. If we hadn't held our position there, the resources of rubber and tin, the strategic situation in Malaya would have been lost to the communists. So in Great Britain being determined to maintain its position throughout the world, it isn't a source of weakness to the free world, it's a source of strength. And as I think you will have noticed, that when we leave places, sometimes encouraged to do so by our friends, but when we do leave them, we leave a vacuum behind us. And it's into the vacuum that the communists are very ready to percolate. And if you look at the Middle East at the present time, you'll see the point of what I've just been saying.
And does this same argument go for colonial territories in Africa and elsewhere?
Well, so far as Africa is concerned, of course, we are very much in the position of trustees in trying to bring these people, help them forward to a condition in which they will be able to undertake responsible self-government. And I think it's important to see that they have the chance to develop their own societies and to live their own lives without these disruptive and subversive elements getting in at them.
During the period I've been here in London, I've noticed that there's been a very lively argument about conscription, national service as it's called. Now, I gather you've had it continuously for everybody for a good number of years, haven't you?
We've had it for 16 years now, since 1939.
That means every young man during this period has had to go into one branch or another of the armed forces.
That is true. With very, very few exceptions. One exception has been the coal miners. Yes, it is a substantial burden. It has a bad effect, of course, on our economy, because a young man at the age of 18, he just wants to settle down. He's perhaps halfway through his apprenticeship, and it's no doubt a disruption to our industry to go on with national service. And also, it isn't the most efficient way of providing armed forces, because a great many of your regular element have to spend their time training the recruit. But on the other hand, we cannot do without national service at the present time.
It's sometimes argued, of course, that in modern warfare, the only man who's any real value is the professional full-time soldier. But I gather you still cling to the view that the mass trained group of this sort really is necessary.
Well, I think we would much prefer to be able to carry out our commitments with purely regular forces. And that's our objective. We're trying to build up towards that. But under present circumstances, we've got almost all our effective army is overseas, partly in Germany and partly distributed throughout the rest of the world. And we cannot meet our present commitments with regulars only. But we hope to work to that day.
Now, it's been a great headache in many countries. Has it been a difficulty here to get real coordination between the various branches of the armed services?
Well, the three services work pretty well together in this country. We've, at the staff level, there's a good deal of integration and coordination. We have a common Imperial Defense College and Joint Services Staff College. We have a Joint Intelligence Bureau and Joint Planning Staffs. And the chiefs of staff, of course, are a committee. They have the collective responsibility for giving military advice to the government. And I would say that the cooperation is, on the whole, pretty good.
It's been said sometimes, of course, that when the wars aren't armed, the generals and admirals spend their time fighting with each other.
Well, I'm not going to be drawn into expressing any opinion about what happens in other countries. But I think in the United Kingdom at the present time, the cooperation between the three services is good. We don't live in an altogether peaceful atmosphere. We have the problems of the Cold War, indeed of limited wars, to deal with, and we live in a situation in which I think the services realize, because of the economic and financial demands that they make upon the economy of the country, they realize they've got to work together, and they've got to cut out waste, and they've got to avoid overlapping.
Could we turn now to the situation on the continent of Europe? In American eyes, it sometimes seems that the British have held back from full cooperation on the continent, and the result has been a weaker Europe than there might otherwise have been. Is that fair?
No, I don't think so. I think that is a misunderstanding. We cooperate extremely closely with Europe. We're associated with the Iron and Steel Community. We go to the Council of Europe. We're in OEEC, and we're in NATO, of course, as the United States and Canada. And also, as a member of the Western European Union, we have a commitment to keep our armed forces on the continent. We have 3 armored divisions in Germany now at the present time. And therefore, we are very, very closely associated with and tied to Europe.
This is something new, I suppose, isn't it? This business of accepting a peacetime military commitment on the continent.
It is indeed.
There's another aspect of defense that, of course, concerns every American, and that's the business of American troops being in this country. Now, how has this worked out on the whole as a peacetime venture?
Well, I think it's been a great success. As you know, your air forces over here, the United States Air Forces over here, have got a very important strategic task. They're very welcome visitors, and I must say, I think that their standard of conduct and behavior is excellent, and really they are very welcome visitors, and they're doing a very good job as ambassadors of their country.
I suppose there's an enormous day-to-day contact on the higher level, the general staff level and so on, between the forces of the United States and this country.
Oh yes, that goes on, and then of course we are working all the time with the United States officers in the Supreme Allied Command Europe, in his headquarters, General Gunther's headquarters. There are a great number of British officers working with their American colleagues and Canadian colleagues. Then in the new Baghdad Pact, we were very glad indeed that the United States decided to send observers to that pact, because that is the pact, you know, started by Turkey and Iraq, which we joined, and which Iran and Pakistan have also joined, which we think contributes a great deal to the strength of the defense of the free world of the Middle East, and the United States is associated with that. And then again, in the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, there's collaboration. And in all the joint bodies, there's constant collaboration between the United States and the United Kingdom, and I think close and cordial.
Looking at it then from the world view, you would say there is something real and meaningful to this Anglo-American alliance that we talk about often in goodwill speeches that in themselves don't seem very important.
No, I think as a matter of solid fact, it is the most important thing in the world today. Of course, we want to be able to criticize one another, but such criticism must be frank but friendly. But the fact is that our two countries believe in certain things. We believe in peace, we believe in the liberty of the individual, we believe in the rule of law, and we believe in a steadily rising standard of living for all the underdeveloped countries of the world. Those are our common purposes, those are our common objectives. And there are some very sinister forces loose in the world today which are trying to prevent us achieving those objects. Now, if we stand together, I think we shall succeed. But if people are able to divide us, if we fall apart, then I think we shall both fail in successfully achieving those objectives. I really believe that.
Well, thank you very much. The guest in this edition of Transatlantic Televiews has been Mr. Selwyn Lloyd. This is Robert McKenzie saying goodbye from London.
Transatlantic Televiews. This interview was recorded on film and is presented by arrangement between United States television stations and British Information Services, New York.